everybody. Welcome to another episode of Real Hawk Talk. I'm Brian Nemhauser, and you can find me all over the place at Hawk Blogger. I'm joined tonight by Evan Hill at Evan Hill HB, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons, and normally I'd introduce the guys, I'd talk to them, I'd shoot the shit, but honestly, guys, I love you. I don't care what's going on in your life right now. There's shit we got to talk about, like, now. And if you haven't heard it, and Jeff, I got to do this for Evan. You got to help catch up, because Evan probably doesn't know everything that's happened today. Like, he still thought Noah Fant got released last time I checked. It was actually George Fant.
I got so annoyed when I saw it. I was so annoyed because I saw Fant was released, and I was like, oh, it's Noah Fant. Like, obviously, cutting him would save 9.5. But anyways, I got bamboozled. So
that's yesterday's news. George Fant, Rayshon Jenkins, Draymond Jones, and then who's the one guy missing yesterday?
The Ray Robertson Harris.
Roy Robertson Harris. Those are the four guys yesterday. Then today, Tyler Lockett is released. Happens this morning. They specifically did it. The Seahawks did it separate from the other guys, so that he could have his own day, be honored, have everybody just talk about the career that he had in Seattle, really do it. It felt like minutes later, DK Metcalf news comes out that he has requested a trade from the Seattle Seahawks. And this is an important note, that the Seahawks are going to let him explore offers. They're gonna have him explore these trade offers. It does not say that the Seahawks are intending to trade him. It does not say that there is no chance that DK could decide that after he explores, just like Matt Stafford, just like some of these other things, Brandon Ayuk could come back. There's still that possibility. But as it stands, it seems like that's where things are headed. We're going to talk a lot about that. Then we get the news that Ernest Jones, linebacker, free agent for the Seahawks, had knee surgery.
Oh.
Had knee surgery.
I didn't really get the story there.
Story is that it's had an effect on potentially delaying when he will be signed, and that the teams might want to do evaluations on him, and that wouldn't be possible until the new league year, which might mean he won't sign prior to free agency. Could delay it further. It also may affect his market value. There might be teams that would not be willing to pay him top dollar. His agent, Ira Turner, quickly jumped all over Bob Condotta's article, saying this article makes it seem like it's a bad thing. This is a great thing. Ernest is the best he's ever been, on and on. Less specifically related to the Seahawks, but still news. Chargers pass rusher Joey Bosa was just released from the Chargers. Yes, that's why I said Chargers. So I think that's interesting. And if I'm a 49ers fan, which I am not, I certainly would think that there's a chance that the Bosa brothers are going to look at reuniting in San Francisco. We'll see how that turns out. We'll see how things play, but I would not be shocked at all if that's how things play out. So there's a lot to break down here, guys. But before we get into all that, Evan, it's been so long, man. Tell me, what was your reaction when you heard all this news?
Oh, wow. I'm going to trigger a lot of Seahawks fans with what I'm about to say, okay? Because I briefly scrolled my Twitter timeline today, and there's a lot of Seahawks fans in panic mode. I think this is one of the most hopeful moments I've had as a Seahawks fan in probably like a couple of seasons, frankly. Trading DK Metcalf may make this team worse, take a step back in the wide receiver position this upcoming season. But if they properly execute this trade and properly allocate the resources, the opportunity cost from paying a receiver like DK Metcalf $30+ million a year, and they take the draft capital they get from a trade. If they properly allocate those resources, this is something that we might look back on and point to as a key indicator towards them taking the next step in rebuilding towards Super Bowl contenders. This is huge. I really believe this. This is the perfect time to trade DK Metcalf. You guys probably covered it in your earlier podcast. If you didn't, I'm going to say it out loud for people who haven't heard it. This offseason, first of all, let's talk about the draft. Receivers, not a strong draft class.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of teams across the NFL desperate for a receiver. DK Metcalf, his value right now is likely the highest it will be for the remainder of his career. Okay. He's 27, 28, something? I think it's 27. 27 years old. This is a guy, we all know this. This is not, I don't think this is like controversial. He is a guy who relies on hyper athleticism to be productive. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't care who I piss off. This is a guy who will fall off a freaking cliff the second his athleticism starts to waver. This is not a Tyler Lockett career arc. This is not a beautiful textbook route runner who is dedicated to his discipline, dedicated to his passion, is in super early, out super late. He is not that guy. He is not that team leader. He never freaking was. And that's okay. You don't have to be. But guess what? He's seeking to be paid like one. He's seeking to be paid like a top 5 receiver. Top 5 receivers in the NFL. $35 million a year, Justin Jefferson. CeeDee Lamb, $34 million. A.J. Brown, $32 million. Amar St. Brown, $30 million. Tyreek Hill, $30 million. Those are franchise cornerstone type of guys. When you think about who the Seahawks have paid over the past decade, you think about these like all pros, right? You think about like Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Russell Wilson, Marshawn Lynch, Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright. When they came up for extension, every Seahawks fan universally was like, sign them. No question in our mind. Team leaders. No doubt we have to retain them. They're studs. They're foundational cornerstones. When DK Metcalf's name is brought up, there's a moment of hesitancy. I think that even his biggest supporters have. At the end of the day, we've seen that this is a guy who prioritizes himself over the team all day long. And by the way, that's okay, but I don't want to pay him like a franchise cornerstone type of player that he's going to be clearly demanding. So this is the reality. There's a lot of ifs here. They have to get the right trade compensation, right? So this is critical. They have to nail that. If they don't nail that, this is a total dud, and we can criticize John Schneider till the cows come home, basically. Get the right trade compensation, and they have to allocate the resources that they would have used on him, both in draft capital and in salary cap. Ideally, I think we're all in agreement here, to the trenches, right? Either side, don't care which, but build out the trenches.
I care a little bit about which.
Okay. But my point is, let's move past the emotions on this for a second. Like DK Metcalf, and I know I sound very passionate about this, he's a fun football player, hyper athletic freak, made a ton of plays for us. This is something where if they execute this trade properly, it will legitimately, I think, accelerate this team's chances towards becoming legitimate Super Bowl contenders. This is selling at peak value. This is perfect. Like, well, if you nail this, John Schneider, the altar's coming back out. Like, there's just no excuse. So those are my thoughts.
It's well said. There's a lot of stuff in there. I want to react to some of it in a minute. But Jeff, I want to recap what I think I understand to be the series of events, because this also goes into who gets credit for some of this as well, because I still believe that the Seahawks did not and may not still want to trade DK Metcalf. And they said that in a bunch of different ways, in a bunch of different forms. And even reports that came out last week is that they were listening, but that was not a surprise. Like, that happens with every player that's in the last year of their deal that's a valuable young player. That just happens. Then this week, Tyler Lockett today, the team orchestrates it so he can have his own day where he is released and he is celebrated. I guarantee you the team did not coordinate with DK Metcalf and his agent to have this released today. And in fact, Brady Henderson reported the team was not happy that they did it and basically overshadowed Tyler's day. I'm not going to go and say that they did it intentionally. I would guess that the agent and DK had no idea when they were going to do the Tyler thing, and this was already pre-arranged with the media, but separate. The reason I'm bringing all this up is this reads to me as the team planned to keep him, or at the very least, they planned to have him play out his final year of his deal, one of the two. And DK Metcalf said, no, I want out. And so I don't think you can give John Schneider credit if this ends up being a trade. Like, I don't think that this looks like the team initiated this. And now it's a matter of like, should they have anticipated this? Should they have? Like, so do you have that same read, or am I misreading the series of events there?
I'm with you completely on that. When I listened to McDonald speak a couple weeks ago during Kubiak's press conference, I remember texting you and I'm like, okay, we got to take this DK trade thing off the table. Like the way they talked about DK, I think I'm usually pretty good at like reading the room or cutting through bullshit. Like McDonald was saying basically when they fired Grubb, one of the things he was pissed about is that DK was basically a guy in the second half of the season that was drawing coverage away. And then Kubiak's press conference, they were like, we need to get this guy as the centerpiece of our passing game. And Ian Rappaport reported today, I think on one of the later shows, that there was a meeting, and I'd heard something similar, that there was a meeting in the last day or so that did not go well. And I think that's what led to a trade request. I don't know if that was a negotiation. I don't know if that's the story that maybe Corbin reported and they were pissed off about that. I don't know. I don't know what happened in this meeting, but I get the same vibe as you, Brian. Something has changed in this relationship, I'm guessing from DK's camp. And I think that they want out. I don't know if it's money. I don't know if it's what's going on, the uncertainty of the direction of the offense. I don't know. But from Rappaport and what I have deemed as a series of events, I've gotten the sense that something has changed in the last couple of days. And who knows, it might have been Corbin's report getting out there and him being like, why am I being shot? Like, F this. But I don't know. But I'm of the impression, because some of the trade proposals that came out last week didn't particularly make sense to me. Like, I know Romeo Doubs had been floated out there by some people, and he's in the last year of his deal, but I don't want to get into him. But yeah, it's the Chargers just created $25 million in salary cap for him, so.
Yeah. Well, so I also want to. Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
Who's DK's agent? Do you know, Brian?
I can tell you in a second. While I look that up, let me cue this for you guys. So, the actual report from Tom Pelissaro was that the Seahawks have agreed to explore options. I think all of us have assumed that means that this is going to end up in a trade. Is there any, like, if you go look at Matthew Stafford, if you look at Brandon Ayuk, you look at some of these high-profile situations where guys have been allowed to explore options, it hasn't always resulted in a trade. Do you think that there is an outside chance that this will result in the Seahawks ending up extending him like they seemingly wanted to as recently as last week?
It's not, I mean, there's maybe a chance, but God, I hope it doesn't happen. This is not a guy that I think we should be allocating $30+ million a year to. And I think that's it's very possible the negotiation started, in the $32-33 million range. And John and his new cap guy from Green Bay probably just looked at him and was like, yeah, this ain't happening. Right. It's I think there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap because between who DK Metcalf actually is, like week in, week out, and what people think he is capable of and what he has actually delivered on. There's a huge difference here. And honestly, the Seahawks should exploit this perception, because the rest of the league, I think optically, there's this view that DK has this untapped potential. He's been in the NFL like 7 years. It's like 7 years into this, okay? Like, I was in high school, okay, when wait, no, that's not true. Wait, I'm old as hell now. I was not in high school when DK Metcalf was
gonna
drafted.
say, I don't think that works.
That was bad math. But my point is, I think there's a greater difference of world here that I think the Seahawks should exploit and should leverage. Now, I will say this. We haven't mentioned it, Brian, but the impact here on the Geno extension talks are fascinating, because I think there's a potential impact there.
Say more.
I mean, he just lost. Well, we expected Tyler Lockett to leave, right? We were hoping maybe for a downgraded deal. Doesn't sound like that's going to happen. That's okay. I'm comfortable with that. But then he loses his wide receiver one, DK Metcalf, right? He wants out. He wants a trade. He wants to go to a contender. By the way, that's how there was some debate on Twitter or X today about who leaked the report. The whole he prefers to go to a contender thing is a dead giveaway. It's from the agent side. Obviously, the Seahawks would not leak this on a day celebrating one of their franchise cornerstones. They are not doing that. They learned this the hard way already with Bobby Wagner and fumbling his whole announcement, if you guys remember that from a couple of years ago or last year, whatever the hell that was. What was I even saying? Geno? I don't even remember.
Yeah, Geno.
Oh, I just think it's like you lose your two of the three top guys that you're throwing to. You have a GM who has openly doubled down on basically the same offensive line strategy that they've done over the past couple of years, over some interviews over the past few weeks. I just don't have like a ton of confidence that this positively impacts the Geno extension talks. Now, I think if you throw the right number at Geno, he's going to sign it, because I think he's comfortable in Seattle. But I don't think this positively impacts things. Do you think I'm crazy?
No, we had the same discussion today.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things to project, both from Geno's perspective and from the team's perspective. If you were to, I think it's fair to say this should only increase the odds that Geno Smith is not a Seahawk. I don't think that means he is not going to be a Seahawk. So let me be really clear. I'm not predicting that Geno Smith is going to be traded or that they're going to move on or anything like that. But the odds of them moving on from Geno Smith have increased if they move on from DK Metcalf. You see it differently, Jeff?
No, I don't know. I don't know. I can't imagine Geno's thrilled at the state of the receiver room right now. I think he would probably love some clarity before signing, but I think that's one of those things that I think what you're saying is pretty fair. Like, I think if anything, it probably increases the chance the whole thing gets blown up. I don't think that was their intention to blow up the offense. No. I think it's been pretty clear with how they're talking. It was more tighten things up, kind of fix what's going on. That's why I so much agree with what you said before about the timeline of events. I still think there's a pretty big indication from the Seahawks standpoint, because if they don't sign Geno, I just don't know where they go at this point. But
yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I think that part of the conversation I almost want to park, because I think that's so much speculative stuff, and I think there's actually a lot of real stuff to talk about. But just to answer your question, Torrey Dandy is DK's agent, and he also represents CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Patrick Surtain, Deebo Samuel, Trey Smith, who just got traded, just got franchised, Denzel Ward, Chris Godwin, who is a free agent, Marshawn Lattimore, who was awful in the playoffs. Oh my God, that guy was so bad. Also Devin Witherspoon. So there's a long list of guys on this that he represents. Some of them on teams that maybe end up being destinations.
I think there's so much opportunity here. I don't care if it's John Schneider getting bullied into it by some, an agent trying to strong arm him on some new fat extension for DK. If they if they get a bidding war scenario here, there's a lot of teams across the NFL. I'm sure you guys have talked about them. Chargers, Steelers, there's other Patriots, there's others, although you mentioned the contender preference. This is a ripe environment to maximize the compensation that they can get in return. And
No doubt.
this is the offseason to do it if they're going to do it.
100%. Well, I think the offseason to do it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Sure.
Quite honestly, but yeah, I think better now than 2 or 3 years from now, most likely. And I do want to clarify one thing, or at least there's another whole group of fans, and most of Chad, I think, is very much in agreement with everything you're saying, Evan. But I mean, DK Metcalf was one of the best, most talented players the Seahawks have ever drafted. Like, from a talent perspective, absolute home run. I think he's
talent or athleticism.
both. I think both. I think that other than maybe Joey Galloway, Walter Jones, like he's in the running for the best athlete the Seahawks have ever added to their roster.
Sure.
And potential in terms of what he could do. I think that he didn't realize all that potential here. I think he's tantalizing every single moment, and we'll talk about what that can imply for trade comp in a second. But for a lot of people, this actually isn't a happy moment. This isn't a let's move on to the next thing. It's a sad thing. And it reminds me a little bit like well, not everyone, but you work in a workplace. And there was a time when I was a manager and somebody who was really good on my team moved to a different job. They took a different job, and I would fight like hell to try to keep them. And I learned pretty early, like, that's actually like not the way. You send them on their way, you wish them the best, and you bring someone else in and you roll. But there are a lot of people, like when they lose their coworker or the person that they're close to, like that's a mourning period that they go through. Like this is a big deal. And I think it is also real. This team doesn't have anybody else like DK Metcalf in terms of sex appeal. And I don't mean that literally sex appeal, but probably that too. I just mean in terms of, people across the league, star power, if you were to ask anyone across the league, who's on the Seattle Seahawks, DK Metcalf would probably be the first answer for almost all of them. And this team just doesn't have a lot of guys like that. So this is a time when the fan base is probably less engaged than it's been for a while. And while I think the three of us are always just thinking about, okay, does this move get us better or get us worse? I think that, like, personally, I'm thinking about it getting whether it gets us better or worse. But I think a lot of people are just like, this guy's DK Metcalf. How can this possibly be a good thing that the Seahawks are moving on from this guy? So I just want to acknowledge that there's another whole group that has, a very different reaction to this news.
Well, you know what I have to say to that? We're taking a very positive, high upside, mitigated risk to potentially win a Super Bowl. I'm sorry. You're going to be okay.
You're not sorry.
You're going to be okay.
You're not sorry. Jeff, what's a situation you think is most similar to this that we could compare this to? Like, what? Not with the Seahawks necessarily, but as we start to look across the league of, okay, draft like what's the potential compensation for this move? What do you think comes to mind?
Third round pick?
A team is willing to offer.
You should explain to folks that don't know. Explain to folks that don't know.
Okay,
what was the report?
I always get triggered by like these nothing burger idiot tweets, and I'm getting ready for our show, and I see Josina Anderson puts out like, I've heard that an NFL team is willing to offer a third round pick for DK Metcalf. And I couldn't help myself. I wrote, no shit. Like, I'm sure lots of teams are willing to offer a third round pick. Like, that was like, it's one of those things like, did you really need to say that? Like, Peter Schrager is the king of that. We're just saying things out loud for the sake of it.
And Jeff, the audience should know that in our group chat, we call you Seahawks Twitter police or Seahawks Twitter cop. So whenever a violation has occurred, okay, a flag needs to be thrown. and the police are called in. Okay. And Jeff is often that cop that shows up rushing to the scene, providing accountability.
I don't know why I get triggered by like incorrect information. Or
No, I do too. Almost like it's a character flaw in myself, I would say. But like to me, it's not even that it's incorrect. It's like, yeah, we live on the planet Earth. Like there's dirt on the ground. There's like the sky's blue. Like that's not information. That's not news. And so it's the same way I felt about reporting that people had acquired about DK. Like, yeah, like that might be true. That might be true. Probably is true. But who cares? Like that's not news. Offering a third round pick is not news. And by the way, what would you get if the Seahawks kept him and let him walk in free agency?
A third round pick.
A third round comp pick. So they're not going to do this deal for a third round pick. Off the table.
It would have been like interesting if it was like, okay, teams are only willing to offer a third round pick. But the fact that one team was willing to give a third, that might be the biggest nothing. I've seen a lot of dumb things on this site. That was really high up there.
Real quick, because I haven't been plugged into this. Have there been, I know the Chargers were, I think, specifically mentioned as a rumored link here. Were there other teams outside of me hypothesizing that were like rumored in?
The honest truth. I mean, Jeff, you should go answer this.
The NFL Network guys mentioned like 4 teams. One of them was the Texans, which I hadn't heard about. They just cleared some cap space, and Stephon Diggs is a free agent. The Raiders were mentioned, obviously tied to Pete Carroll. They have like $98 million. The Patriots were mentioned. He's actually pushed back against that publicly and the podcast. He said he has no interest in going to play there. I think those were the 4 teams that were mentioned. There was no mention of the Packers in that report.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was another show I tuned into, and they said they like unaffiliated with the Seahawks. It might have been Greg Rosenthal. I can't remember who it was. Anyway, they were like, I went through to try to figure out who might be targets, and the reality is it's easier to come up with a list of who wouldn't want DK Metcalf on their team, because every team, I'll tell you, I'll throw a team out there. I don't know. I don't think it's where DK necessarily wants to go. I don't know if they can do it, but the Baltimore Ravens make a ton of sense to me, because they are a team that's trying to get over the top. And what did we hear, Jeff, when Eric DeCosta went on with Todd McShay? One of the little tidbits that stuck out to me was he said, as he was going over all their draft guru amazingness over the years, he was like, the one position we've never been able to get is the big X receiver.
Yeah.
And those guys just don't grow on trees. And so I'm thinking now, this is a team that can't get over the top. They're going to be drafting at the end of the first round. Could you get them to do a first and a third? Could you get them to do something that other teams wouldn't be willing to, because it's the back half of the draft? They expect those draft picks to be at the end of the round anyway, and they're trying to maximize Lamar Jackson's time. I would do that if I was Baltimore.
The Bills too. The Bills.
The Bills are a great call out.
Oop, we just lost you, Jeff.
I was wondering if what happened on my side.
Usually what happens is he gets disconnected, and then he has to reselect the right mic. So we'll see if this you have to reselect the right mic, and then we'll be back with Jeff.
Okay.
We're talking about
the Bills.
Yeah.
The Bills, like Josh Allen's deep ball with DK, they say they have the same problem. They couldn't get over the hump too. There's a lot of Bills reporters being like, they need to give up their first round pick for this dude.
Not many OF stars in Buffalo, DK. That's all I got to say. Not many.
I mean, so let's talk about the other side of this. Well, before we do that, let me go over some trade comp, because I think it is worth throwing some cold water on everyone expecting first round picks. I just got to tell you, like, I would love that. I still think that's what they should shoot for. But here's the wide receiver trades over the last few years. We just had Deebo Samuel get traded. I'm not saying these are the same level, so everyone calm down. I'm just telling you what wide receivers have gone for. He was traded for a 5th round pick. The Pittsburgh got Mike Williams for a 5th round pick from the Jets. Dallas acquired Jonathan Mingo from Carolina for a 4th round pick. Deontay Johnson went to the Ravens for a 5th round pick. DeAndre Hopkins was acquired by the Chiefs for a 5th round pick. That could become a 4th, and I think it did conditionally. Cleveland got a 3rd round pick and a next year's 7th round pick for Amari Cooper, and a 6th round pick. All right. Devontae Adams was a 3rd round pick that can become a 2nd round pick if Adams is an all-pro or active for the AFC Championship game. Well, that didn't happen. So a 3rd round pick for Devontae Adams. Jahan Dotson was acquired by Philadelphia for a 3rd round pick, a 7th round pick, 2 7th round picks. And so they also gave back a 5th round pick in that deal. I can keep going on. Stephon Diggs. Now, these are a couple of interesting ones. Stephon Diggs, in the last year of his deal, did not sign an extension. Buffalo traded a 2nd round pick for him. They also gave up a 5th round pick and next year's 6th round pick. So it was Diggs, a 5th, and a next year 6th for a 2nd. So it wasn't just a straight Diggs for a 2nd. Keenan Allen was for a 4th. And then, Jerry Jeudy was a 5th and a 6th. So I'm just telling you guys, it's not that pretty. But what we also know, and I tweeted this out, Albert Breer had published what was confirmed by him to be the deals offered for Brandon Ayuk this past year. And I think these are actually the closest comp. Ayuk was 25, DK's 27. Ayuk from Pittsburgh offered a 2nd and a 3rd. New England offered a 2nd, a 3rd in the following year, and Kendrick Bourne, the wide receiver. Cleveland offered a 2nd, a 3rd, and Amari Cooper. Those are, I think, closing in on what are more realistic things to hope for. If people are going to point at A.J. Brown, a 1st and a 3rd, that would be ideal. I don't know if that's what you're going to get for DK Metcalf.
So I'll say this. A lot of the names you mentioned were either older players in season trades on expiring contracts. The deals I would probably look at based on like the time of their career is when Stephon Diggs went to Buffalo, he went for a 1.
Mm-hmm.
Tyreek Hill was traded a few years ago. It was like a combination of Tyreek Hill's at a much higher level than DK. But I think Evan made this point in our chat, and I think I do strongly agree with it.
Real quick. So Hill was a 22 1st round pick, a 2nd rounder, and 2 4th round picks.
And Hill is obviously at a higher echelon than DK was.
Yeah.
Hill is like top 3 receiver in the league. So I think what DK has a little more value than Ayuk is a couple things. I think Evan mentioned this. Every team that's interested in acquiring DK, even versus an Ayuk, is going to think we can fix this guy. Because of his unique profile, and he's been productive. Like, the people who are his staunchest advocates were like, this guy's numbers are like as good as Jerry Rice in the first 7. Not like that, but like something like that. 2, this market for receivers is bad. Like, I saw Brady Henderson allude that this is a crowded market, and Jeff threw a flag on the play. I don't know if you guys caught that. I strongly disagree with Brady there, and I think Bill Barnwell was saying this is a very crowded. It's actually not. It's actually a really shitty receiver market. It's full of a lot of name players that are not what they used to be. Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs coming off an ACL, Chris Godwin coming off an ACL, Keenan Allen, who looked slow as fuck last year. Oh, shit. Okay. But
just keep swearing. Just get them all out there.
Yeah. So anyway, it's not a very good market. And there's what T. Higgins was supposed to be like the bell of the ball kind of thing, and they franchised him. So you take a bad receiver draft, well, not a bad one, just no top dude, a bad free agent market, and teams have a lot of cap room this year because the cap went up and the Chargers just cleared $25 million. The Raiders have $93 million. It sets up really well where last year, for example, that draft was really good. Like, teams would not have. The receiver draft last year was excellent. Brian Thomas was like, what, the 4th receiver to go? Lad McConkey was like the 7th receiver to go. Lad McConkey looks very good this year. this year, like Matthew Golden is probably the first receiver off the board. It's
or Ted McMillan, one of the two.
Ted McMillan, like his stock has been really weird, like going into the year. It's very different. So I think the Ayuk is like a good starting point, but I think because of circumstance, Seattle actually may be a little ahead of that.
Well, so on that note, so you go back to 2022, Devontae Adams was sent to the Raiders for a first and a second, right?
Mm-hmm.
You did talk about Tyreek Hill was a first, a second, 2 fourths, and a sixth. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, that's not happening.
Wild. AJ Brown was a first and a third. Marquise Brown was a first, believe it or not.
He was.
But it was also they traded a third round pick for a first round pick plus Marquise Brown. So I guess one of my questions though, guys, is we've talked about it on this show for years, like literally years, that the wide receiver market is kind of crazy. Like the supply of good receivers coming out of college feels like every year there's just this massive influx of good receivers. It's been years and years of really good drafts. And yet the wide receiver pay scale just blew up and guys are getting over $30 million all of a sudden. Are we potentially seeing a situation where teams are reconsidering wide receiver values, and that's maybe good in the sense in that the Seahawks are smart to not pay DK all that money, but is it going to be bad in the sense our team's going to value him enough to offer him what we all want? Are they going to value this position enough to value to really offer what we want?
In general, I'd say no, but go look at New England's depth chart at receiver.
Oh yeah.
Like they have Drake May a rookie contract. They need the Chargers right now. Like we talked about Brian before the playoff game, like kind of where they are, how do they get better? Like they have Ladd McConkey and then that's it. Josh Palmer's a free agent. Like a lot of these teams, like they're right there. Like the Raiders have like a empty receiver room. Mm-hmm. So I get what you're saying, but these guys have to get a number one receiver somehow. And maybe you're asking, well, Seattle's giving up their number one receiver. But I think if DK was just like a straight free agent in a normal year, I think his value would be like we were saying during the year, like, are you even going to get a second for this guy? And I think the timing is unique. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where so much of Evan's points are true and so much of Brian's points are true. Because I think Evan's point was like, this is a unique opportunity to trade him. And I think Brian's right that I don't think it was their plan to. But
yeah. I don't care if they got bullied into it. I don't care.
Yeah.
I imagine, I'm just thinking about Clint Kubiak. He's like, whoa. This is not what I signed up for. That poor guy. Well, I'm kind of curious, as you guys look at this and you say, okay, well, maybe they will get what they're looking for. What's a good trade, Evan? Like what would you look at and say, okay, man, this is really good return? And what's the point where it becomes no way? What's the cutoff?
Yeah, I think like a good return is like a low first and a third.
That'd be amazing.
I think they can get that. They might get more. They might.
Really?
The market conditions, man, it's really good timing. It really is. And I mean, this is a guy with so much name recognition. Like, if you think about the Seattle Seahawks right now, fans and other teams and franchises and general managers and head coaches, they don't think of any other player outside of DK Metcalf. They don't. And like that matters. It's the OBJ marketing.
Yeah. We talked about this offline. He's kind of the inverse of Geno Smith. Like his value, like what people will pay for him is probably significantly higher than what he's worth.
100%.
And Geno's the exact opposite. Like,
yeah.
He could be worth a lot and people aren't going to pay him that.
I think if you don't get like a very high second at minimum, I think it becomes a bad deal.
Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, like I think like if you got like a mid-second and like another pick, I think I could swallow that. It's not ideal. But I said today on when we talked before, if it's a third, That's a non-starter for me. Mid to late second, I would need something else, and maybe a receiver, or maybe another pick. Ideally, another pick. Like, I think if you're trading a DK and then added a receiver that you have to pay, like, there's no point of it. I think unless you're getting, yeah.
Finish your thought. Sorry, Jeff. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if you got like a second and a third, like, I'm fine with that. I can live with that.
I could live. I think I could live with that too, depending on where the second is and the third is. But this idea of including a receiver, that honestly bothers me a little bit, because what that reeks of is the Seahawks being reactive and being like, whoa, we didn't want to get rid of DK and we want to still contend. So get us one of your receivers so we can still be. I'm like, no, like that is the wrong way to handle this. This is an opportunity to redistribute your resources to different positions and to go out there and look. We haven't spent a lot of time on receivers in this draft. Jack Besh is in this class. Jalen Knowles in this class. Jaden Higgins is in this class. There's a number of these guys that are in this class that you can have on day 2. And then, by the way, if you have these extra picks, you can be talking about getting a quarterback. You can talk about getting a offense. You can get Donovan Jackson or someone else at the top of the second round instead of having to wait all the way to 50. So I don't want them to go get one. Like, I don't want Dontavian Wicks or one of these guys from the Packers. Like, the only guy that I kind of could get behind so far, Rashid Shaheed from the Saints.
Oh, yeah. But
like,
they can't
he is a perfect match
They can't
for what
take
they
on
do.
DK.
Yeah, probably not.
I tweet a hypothetical, or not tweet a hypothetical.
Yeah, tweet it.
Share a
Tweet it.
hypothetical.
Yeah.
Taking a Twitter break. If the Raiders came to you and offered number 37, so second round pick this year, in a pick swap, first round pick swap in 2025, you would take it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
You
they
would?
wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that. That's that
There's
goes.
no way they would
I
do
feel
that.
like the Raiders might surprise people this year and win a
They
lot.
might, but they're not going to do that.
18 to 6. I
Yeah.
would do that alone. I think.
Yeah,
18 and-
18
what?
and 6.
It would be 18 for 6.
No, for next year.
Oh, for next year.
I'm not talking this year. I'm talking next year.
What if you're worse than them?
That's why the proposal. That's why I was like shocked with your guys' reaction.
Oh, I thought you meant this year.
No.
People don't pick swap for future years. That doesn't make any sense because you don't know what you're getting.
But that's kind of the gamble. Has that never been done before?
In the NBA, it happens.
The NBA it happens. Okay.
Nope. I'm out on that.
Yeah.
What I would offer is, we know that Michael Mayer is a guy, a tight end that the Raiders drafted a couple years ago, high pick, that they're looking to potentially move. The Seahawks could use another tight end. And if you were talking about trade DK Metcalf for Michael Mayer and the Raiders' first round pick next year, I'm open to listening to that conversation. I think a Michael Mayer and AJ Barner combination could be good for years to come. Takes out one of your needs from the draft. And guys, I said it on the show earlier today. The number one thing I'd want in a trade for DK Metcalf is a 2026 first round pick. It's not about the draft this year.
Is that just because like the draft class is better next year, or can you explain that to me as draft nerds?
Because you need a quarterback, and you need to get a little bit lucky to get that top of the draft quarterback. And if you are able to get a Patriots or a Giants or a Jets or a Raiders or some of these teams, who knows? It could be almost any Denver. Who knows? Like all these different opportunities. If they just fall on their face, it'd be fun for Denver and for Denver to have another bad season and for us to get a top. That would be amazing.
Broncos fans were tagging me so hard today in my mentions. They were like, your team's going in the shitter. DK Metcalf is leaving, and I'm just sitting behind the screen with a dead smile on my face because like this is so good. This is positive news for the Seahawks.
It is positive news.
Like they don't realize this.
And it's not positive news because I think any of us don't like DK Metcalf or don't think he's a good player. It's positive news because I think this team's stuck in. Anyway, we won't go through all that. But
well, that's it. That's what I don't get. Like I asked you guys before the show, like I haven't gotten the gauge for the fan base. I don't know. I just follow mostly like bloggers and reporters, and most people were pretty understanding. There seems to be like a fan base who are pretty upset. Like I don't really get it. Like, I get DK is obviously a cool, fun player, and like maybe you're like, oh, the team's falling apart, but like, but what are we scared of? Not being 9-8 next year again, being the 8th seed in the NFC? Like, is that what we're scared of? We're stuck. Like, we've had the same season 4 years in a row.
But Jeff, I listened to so many different shows, especially national shows, talk about this news. And you know what they said, guys? Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, they lose both of those guys this year. They had that's a huge loss. They don't know what Tyler Lockett is anymore. Like they have no really awareness, but they know how good he's been. And they know DK Metcalf catching Buda Baker and what kind of athlete he is, all the stuff we've talked about. So yeah, that's what people are hearing, and they're like, who's going to replace him? It all comes back to like, it's not like the Seahawks are stacked with household names that everyone's super excited about.
I'm not here. I didn't listen to your guys' full podcast. I listened to part of it earlier today, and I do listen to the podcast, Brian, for the record. I'm not convinced they need to get like a receiver in return.
I agree.
Like,
no, I think it's a bad idea.
Agree. I saw that idea floated around. I just need to shoot that dog down.
And I don't want them to use a first round pick on a receiver necessarily.
No.
Hell no. That's the whole point of this thing.
I'm not totally against it. If you have 2 first round picks this year, use one on best player available, and then the next one ends up being like a Luther Burden or a Matthew Gold. Like, I'm not totally opposed, but that's not my assumption. Like, and I certainly, if they don't get a first round pick in return, if they spent their first round pick this year on a receiver after trading DK, if they only had one first, I'm not on board with that.
Oh, that's a horror. That just resets the whole clock.
We've had DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett for years, and now JSN also for the last couple of years. How has that worked out?
That's what's been driving me crazy about this team, where they've talked about, okay, we want to be this big physical team that wins in the trenches. Mike McDonald comes in and he says, we want to play the style that no one wants to play. But then I look at the roster in the last few years, and their best players have been receivers and corners. They've started to make the shift towards defensive line in the last 2 years. And we saw the fruits of that last year. But I've just been so tired of, like, they had Pete, who was so clear with how he wanted to play. And then all their best players were receivers. And, like, I know it's a premium position at the end of the day, but it's the final piece of the puzzle to me. Like, I would be totally fine with just like a second, third round receiver beside JSN next year and get the rest of the team figured out, build strengths otherwise. I think the whole reason I've been kind of encouraged by the idea of trading DK is there's now a real opportunity to build the offensive line. And if John doesn't, we can rip that guy apart next week. But if you look at, like, I can get into like the numbers and stuff, but like if you look at the cap commitments for 2026, Seahawks right now are number 1 in the NFL in cap room. And that's obviously going to be filled out when they start Cross is going to get the 5th-year option. Things are going to happen. But a lot of that money and probably their models were allocated to DK Metcalf. And that would have been a big number next year. You could now add 2 offensive linemen, top of the market in free agency. I don't know if they will, because Schneider never does that, but they can. Mm-hmm. That's a big deal. That could change the whole outlook of the team.
Jeff, I love something you said earlier on the podcast earlier today about when you think about, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when you think about the state of this team, it's just not the time to reallocate another $34 million to a receiver. This is a team that is retooling, rebuilding, trying to, they're establishing an identity with a new head coach 1 year in and starting to lay the foundation for how this team is going to look. We're some pieces away, right, from being Super Bowl contenders, to put it lightly. Paying DK Metcalf just doesn't make a lot of sense for this team right now. It's not like we're one step away, one receiver away from winning a Super Bowl. We're not. Like, it's time to reallocate these resources while his value is basically stratospheric, and hopefully execute well.
Can I switch gears for a second? We'll come back to the DK thing, I'm sure, but I'm going to get to Patreon questions here in a second as well. But the Bears trade a 6th-round pick for Jonah Jackson, guard. They trade a 4th-round pick for Joe Thuney, who's still one of the best guards in the NFL. They could go out and sign Drew Dahlman at center, and then they could go out and use their top 10 pick on Will Campbell or a tackle, Kelvin Banks, someone that falls to them. And they've completely remade that offensive line in one offseason. They've been super aggressive. Should the Seahawks have done those things? Like, I'm sitting there wondering, like, are the Seahawks, do they know something that they're going to set up and be able to get better players on the offensive line? What's your take when you heard that?
I was very upset by how weak that draft compensation was.
It's a 2026 fourth, by the way. It's not even this year.
I did not know that. It's a next
I didn't either
year.
until I looked recently.
That's a joke.
So to answer your question, the Seahawks should have absolutely done. They should have topped them. I wonder if they were even offered it. Like Ryan Poles was the former assistant GM in KC.
Yep.
I'm sure they had an off-table conversation. But one of the reasons so many people in the NFL promote the idea of hiring offensive head coaches is because offensive head coaches really value offensive lines. Ben Johnson, who was a Seahawks finalist last year, came into Chicago, and I'm sure he said, we can't have these guards. Let's go out and obviously, like getting Joe Thuney is an unbelievable move, but even getting Jonah Jackson, like if I was doing the Wyman and Bob interview with Schneider tomorrow, this would be my first question. Like, why haven't you done a move like the Bears have done? And like, it would have been such an easy PR win for them. And on the field, it just would have been like, they need experience. It was cheap. They have the room to pay him next year, especially with the DK. Like, I don't know unless they're just like, okay, maybe we're going to get younger with some of these free agent guys and not give up draft picks. I understand that. But if they go out and don't sign a Will Fries and a Dahlman and they just do their usual free agency stuff, it's a bad look because the Bears have the exact same kind of depth chart that they did.
Yep.
And that's why a lot of people advocate the hiring of offensive coaches because they really prioritize interior offensive line play. And so many of these guys have come in, and that's where a defensive coach, Mike McDonald's talked about it, and I don't know if Schneider's the big poopa here, so he would have to overcome that, but I think it's a really bad look if they don't have a really good week next week because deals were out there for them. I don't know if the Jonah Jackson one was per se, especially in a zone scheme, but it's not great.
This comment, flagrant, guards can play till they're like 37,000.
He's 32. For what it's worth.
I think he turns 33 next season, but like still.
Guards can
like,
play
are you much happier with Will Fries coming off an ACL at 25 years old? Like, I'd bet on Joe Thuney. Like, I just would.
Yeah. That one floored me how low the draft comp was for that move. Knowing how, I mean, what has Schneider said as well? Everybody's trying to get these guys. Well, if everybody's trying to get these guys and one of the best is on the market, I hear what you're saying, Jeff, about there's these connections that maybe facilitate these moves. But I don't believe that the Chiefs are going to be like, we're going to give you a sweetheart deal. If there was someone else that was willing to offer more for a position that's in short supply, I would guess that they would do that because that's the best thing for the franchise. So
yeah,
the implication is that a 2026 fourth was the best offer. And that kind of brings into question this whole notion of these guys are in such short supply, people are overpaying for them.
That's what I mean. That would be my first question tomorrow if I was doing that interview. I don't think it will be addressed, but I don't understand why this. I don't know if they just wanted to get younger, but like I was a little taken back that they couldn't have tapped that offer.
Yes, go ahead, Devin.
So are we just going to pay Noah Fant like $14 million this year?
It sure looks like it.
Yeah. It doesn't. The worst part is it's in the last year of its deal. It's like a clean break.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a head scratcher.
Oh no, it's more than that.
No, I mean, we've been pretty clear that not super supportive of that move. The one thing I will say is you did have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and JSN, and there weren't a lot of targets to go around, and this is a much more tight end centric offense than what they've been running. Noah Fant reasonably should have a better season this season, better numbers than what he's had before. Doesn't mean he will, but that's the one thing I could kind of wrap my head around. there was a funny thing out there about Noah Fant and whether he wishes he was back in Denver and not really answering, which isn't great. Let's spend a second on that, and then we get to some questions here from patron folks. DK did say, or at least the report said, he wants to go to a contender. That's not by accident. That is saying he does not believe the Seahawks are a contender. That's also a message to that locker room that DK Metcalf does not believe this team is a contender. And Tyler Lockett's gone now. You've released Rayshon Jenkins. You released George Fant. You released all these guys. What do you think the reaction? Like, JSN and Witherspoon spoke to Kay Adams at the Super Bowl, and they're like, there's no way DK is getting moved and Tyler Lockett. Like, they're like, that's don't believe the noise, you know? And JSN now is like, what the hell is going on? So is Mike McDonald and John Schneider at risk of losing this locker room?
Jeff, take that one.
It's hard for me to say. Like, Brian, you were in the locker room this year. You'd have a much better. I would say no freaking way. Like, I know a lot of the guys are young, but like this stuff happens all the time in the NFL. Teams have, it's the not for long league. It's literally part of the business. I didn't see a lot of people freaking out online. I saw a lot more Tyler Lockett notes from current players. Mm-hmm. The only one I really saw was like JSN was kind of joking, I get, and then Tariq Woolen was like, "What the hell's going on?" But I didn't see a lot of like pushback, and I don't know, like I think that's a pretty big stretch. I don't think DK is considered one of the, like the leaders in the room. I think with his contract in the last year of your deal, like his name's been floated out there for a while. I would be pretty surprised if this had like a kind of impact. Like they traded Russ away a couple of years ago, and obviously he wasn't the most liked guy in the room, but.
And by the way, that was very different. I keep hearing people say, they said that they weren't going to trade Russ, and then they did. Well, they were very careful with their words on the Russ thing. If you go back and you listen to what they said, we have no intent to trade Russell Wilson. They never said they weren't going to do it. They never talked about him as like he is the central part of everything we're doing. They had very different language about DK Metcalf. And so to some extent, they've been spurned. Like they wanted him. I'm pretty convinced they wanted him here and they wanted to do that. Now, I might be wrong. I've been wrong before, but very, very recently, as a matter of fact. But that's of note to me. Evan?
I mean, I'll just take it a step further and go there. I think it's total bullshit for DK and his camp to release it on today, and I'll speculate. Like, no way in my mind that wasn't coordinated or that they weren't given the heads up. It's total Bush League to do it on Tyler Lockett's day, a guy who's been nothing but a veteran contributor and beloved member of this locker room, this franchise, this regime, multiple coaching staffs, multiple offensive coordinators. Like there's bigger DK Metcalf haters out there than me, but today is a real affirmation, I think, around
So you're saying he fumbled it?
It's bad, Jeff. It's bad.
Why?
We'll get back to a note. I want to make sure we come back around to this notion of DK not having has no trade clause, and what does that mean for leverage? Because I want to get back to that in a second. But let's go through a couple of these Patreon questions. So Silk asks, this is for both of you. What is your favorite Tyler Lockett moment? Evan, I'm going to start with you.
Ooh, no, go with Jeff.
I'm going to start with you. That's what I meant.
It's got to be that play in the back corner of the end zone against the Rams. The combination of like him and Russ, like that was one of the coolest plays I've ever seen in my life. And to him to like toe tap in that corner, it was just like a heave throw. It was such a cool moment. And like, I think they won that game on a Rams missed field goal, if I remember correctly. But that catch in the back of the end zone was just like vintage, like Tyler Lockett. He was so good at like making these plays that like no one thought were possible at his size and his skill level. And that one, I just don't even. I think Derek posted a clip of it, and just seeing it was almost surreal. How cool that play was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. There was I think it was the first game of his career. He had a punt return or a kick return.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was literally the day that I purchased his jersey. And I think I actually had to customize it because I don't think the Seahawks Pro Shop had like put it, whatever on display or easily accessible yet. But I remember watching that. It was a punt return, right? Or was it a kick return?
Yep.
It was a
Yeah.
punt. I remember watching that punt return and being like, "Oh, this guy moves different. He's electric." And obviously, he had some injuries that sort of changed that part of his game. But that was a real early moment where it was like, "Okay, we hit that draft pick. Can't wait to see what he becomes." So I'll never forget where it was when that happened.
Those are two that came out to my mind as well. I also just mentioned he had a really gruesome injury, and he came back from it, and his first year after was not necessarily the same player. And there were some of us on this show that were like, hey, we should be trading Tyler Lockett, or I shouldn't re-sign him. We shouldn't give him that big contract. And, I will say I was not one of those people, but what a great career. I have nothing but admiration for Tyler Lockett. And I hear what you're saying, Evan, about DK. I've seen those two together. I don't believe for a second DK would ever intentionally overshadow Tyler's moment. I think it was a mistake, and it just was bad timing. And these aren't the types of things that agents coordinate with the PR team. Like, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But it is really unfortunate, and I would bet you that DK's reached out to Tyler and texted him and said, "Hey, man, sorry." That's my guess. I don't know that, but that's my guess.
I hope.
Next question. This is a question for Jeff from Brendan. It says, with the Ernest Jones news, can you go over the linebacker market and free agency? Assuming he still signs here, but wondering what's out there if not.
I'll be honest, I have not spent much time on the inside linebacker market. I've always just been under the impression that Ernest Jones was going to sign. I know Drake Greenlaw is out there. He's coming off a very gruesome injury. There's talk that San Francisco is not going to bring him back. And I don't know if you guys heard this story. Like, San Francisco is having a cash budget problem right now. And so do I want to get into this now, or should we save this for another time? But
I actually want to know what's happening.
So apparently the ownership, Grant was actually the first one to report this last year. People thought he was an idiot. But Grant reported that the ownership was pissed off about a lot of the deals they handed out in the last couple of years. And everyone's like, Grant, what the hell are you talking about? Like, there's no way. There's that cute story that whatever. And then I heard John Lynch say it the other day that, like, we can't spend the way we want to. Everyone's like, oh, San Francisco has so much cap room. They're rolling forward. And Mike Silver and Tim Kawakami came out and said that Jed has basically told them to trim their cash budget because they're pissed about how Ayuk was signed. Apparently, Ayuk was supposed to be traded, and then Kyle kind of went rogue and signed him. And everyone in the front office was pissed off. So Schefter was on, I think, the McAfee show the other day and was saying that they're going to have trouble getting through free agency because them and Brock Purdy are at a everyone's focused on their cap situation, but they actually have a cash problem. And so everyone keeps saying that Jed York has basically told them they can't spend the way they were kind of in this all-in window where they kept pushing money forward and forward, but big cash budget. And so they're not supposed to be they're supposed to lose a lot of players in free agency, and Drake Greenlaw is supposed to be one of them. So that's on a watch with the Joey Bosa thing. But Brian, I don't know how much you've spent on the inside linebacker market. I haven't really gotten into that at all. Like, Zach Bond signed today.
Levante David, there's Drake Greenlaw, there's Bobby Wagner, there's Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, if you want to go back to those guys. Robert Spillane, Shaq Thompson is out there, got released. Obviously Nick Bolton is a name that everyone's going to know, or a lot of people will know. There's a pretty decent list of off-ball linebackers, I would say. So I don't think it's going to matter, but I still think Ernest Jones is going to be a Seahawk. That's my expectation.
So do I. I don't really understand. Like, I know the agent came out as like it's not a big deal. Like Bob did a really good job of that story. Bob said that basically it's kind of a nothing burger injury. He's expected to be back doing all football activities by June at the latest. It was just a cleanup. So I don't see this like being a huge holdup unless the Seahawks are just at like a point where they had to leak that to get negotiations going. But it seems like something you'd be very comfortable signing.
Yeah, the timing of it's a little odd.
Yeah.
Evan, this is for you from Brendan. It's very important. I want you to pay close attention. Would like to know who the top free agent targets are for Evan's ear spider. Who, like, has your spider been whispering free agent targets into your ear?
Yeah, there's one key guy who's a free agent that hasn't been discussed yet. You want to know who it is?
Who?
Quentin Jefferson is a free agent.
Yeah, he's going to be on like his 7th team in the last 7
He's
years.
a free agent, baby. He's a
All
free
right.
agent.
I'm taking this in a different direction. I'm going to get to the next couple questions. There's a name that I thought you were going to bring up who's not a free agent, but has been brought up as also requesting a trade. His name's Myles Garrett. Is there any combination that makes sense for the Seahawks sending DK Metcalf to Cleveland and Myles Garrett coming back and some kind of does any of that make sense to either of you?
If he was like 5 years younger, yes. But he's 30. And I don't get the sense like that I don't feel like the timelines work, right? He wants to go to a contender. Didn't he say that? He wants to go to a contender. Not sure we're there yet. Am I wrong?
No.
Well, he doesn't have a no trade clause. You could send him there. I don't know if they'll do it.
We'll come back to that in a second, but I was just curious. All right, Matt G asks, thoughts on this for you, Jeff? Holding firm on DK, then tagging him twice like T. Higgins and saying goodbye at age 30.
I think that would piss off the locker room more than trading them. I think you don't want like a miserable DK in the locker room. And the problem with tagging these guys is DK's cap number this year is $31 million, which was why we all said, okay, this is a decision point in the contract. If you tag them, you can't move the tag around. Like that number is going to be even bigger, and then tag them again. That's going to eat up like basically all your cap room. So no, that is not a consideration.
Evan, you're jumping out of your shoes. What do you want to say?
Yeah, no, it's not even possible, by the way, for Geno either beyond this season. It's the cap number for a DK tag next year would be 38.2. It's just, you can't do it.
All right, Trenches no matter what. We got 2 more questions here. Trenches no matter what says, if the Seahawks fall flat this year, would you want to move on from John Schneider? It feels like a make or break period for his tenure. Evan Hill.
Fall flat. What does that mean? Are we talking lose? How many games?
Let's say that they're a 5-6 win team.
Ooh. It kind of depends how they lose and what he does this free agency, but that's not like a sexy answer. But I think he'd really be on the hot seat if that happened. Yeah.
Jeff, last question. This comes to you from Hawks fan Matt Man. If there is a team who might want DK who also has a guard or center, is there a team who might want DK who also has a guard or center we could get back in trade? Is there any teams that you've looked at that make sense there?
The Chiefs would have been.
Yeah.
No, I've not been able to find that. If all the teams don't typically trade guards away.
Traded to Carolina for Damian Lewis.
Yeah, there you go. Teams don't typically trade like good guards away. It's usually guys like Gabe Jackson who are kind of at the end or like they have 3 guards signed and they need to get rid of one. I have not found that. I think the teams that you're going to be looking at, the Chargers, the Bills, Patriots, not a lot of tradable guards. I think if you're adding DK to take away from your offensive line, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say no on that one. I think there was a very rare opportunity that might have worked, but not this. They didn't do that.
We're all pretty quick in moving on to the next thing, but I have not yet had a chance to comb through every roster and look at that. So we'll definitely have time to start looking at those options, assuming this is going to take a little while, which is my next question for you guys. When do you think this happens, if it happens? Do you think it's going to happen right away?
I think he gets shipped before the first wave of free agency is over.
Really? So next week?
Yeah, I just don't get the sense that like with this draft class that there's and how many teams need a receiver. I think one of them, I could see a bidding war to an extent, and one of them gets aggressive and just throws John an offer that he can't decline, and at that point you just take it. I think
Jeff?
it's yeah.
Go finish your thought, Evan.
I just think it's the amount of teams that could fit as a receiving team for him. It really could spark a bidding war. So yeah.
I hope Evan's right because I'd love to see them get that immediate cap room now to use on free agents. But my guess is it lingers a bit, and maybe it happens between free agency and the draft. I think waiting to see who misses in free agency, even though the free agency class sucks, might be advantageous to them. But also, I think if you're in a bidding war, you want maximum bidders, and that happens before free agency. So my gut is it takes a while to do, and John maybe tries to save the thing, but I think there's a very real chance Evan's right.
I've been thinking that my first reaction is that this could happen the day of the draft. That's like when you can maximize. Like teams gonna have had the free agents, they're gonna see how the draft boards falling, and they're gonna be like, man, I'd rather have DK Metcalf than this first round pick. That would take a lot of chutzpah to wait, because here's the thing: if you don't get that offer, then you're the San Francisco 49ers from last year with Brandon Ayuk, and you're talking about next year's picks, which is great from my perspective, but you're probably talking about lower compensation. Teams know that you want to get rid of them. Like, I don't know if that's the best way to play this.
Yeah, you lose all your negotiated power if that.
I don't. It's one of those situations where I don't think you squeeze out every penny. If you get a good offer,
you take it.
Take it.
100%. I agree on that for sure. I agree on that. So last thing, at least that I had, if you guys have other things we should hit on them, is this notion of DK Metcalf doesn't have a no trade clause. Russell did, and so he's able to kind of force things in certain ways. I saw some annoying reports from somebody about the offer that the Commanders had offered 3 first-round picks, and the Seahawks, if they had just taken that, look at where they would have been. Russell didn't want to go there. He specifically, like he said, I only want to go to this team. And the Seahawks had to basically take what was offered there. So DK does not have a no-trade clause. But DK is also on the final year of his deal. He said he wants to go to a contender. I can't imagine a team trading a first or even a second and a third for a player that's not excited to come there, and possibly a player that doesn't want to sign an extension. So it feels like DK Metcalf does have some leverage in where he ends up. The Seahawks can't just send him to, Siberia.
Wait, you're telling me other general managers in the NFL, when they acquire a big-time player, negotiate an extension as a part of that trade? Wait, really?
Did Derek just parachute into this meeting?
Does our GM do that?
No, our GM believes that you need to be around the team first to see how they fit in, that's worked so well other than Cliff Averill. It's worked for every other of their moves.
I just had some Jamal Adams PTSD hit me like a wave. I'm so sorry.
Well, Ernest Jones is they probably should have signed him by now.
So how much do you think DK is going to influence where he goes?
Relatively significantly, I think.
Yeah. And do you assume that he wants to go to one of the Southern California teams?
Yeah. I mean, the LA Charger. I mean, right? Is that
Chargers really seem like the most likely. Chargers or the Raiders.
They've been sniffing around him for like a couple of years, right? Haven't they?
That was the report today that they tried to aggressively trade for him last year.
The Chargers did.
And they have Sanjay Lal there, who's his was the Seahawks receiver coach that DK really connected with. And
DK
Ooh.
loves Sanjay Lal.
yeah, so they got rid of their whole receiving crew last year. That was clearly a gap for them. Don't know what the Jim Harbaugh Metcalf dynamic would be like. That'd be a little odd. But I see the Chargers being by far the most logical fit. But I saw someone throwing out today Quentin Johnson, like the Seahawks should get him back. No, like that guy, he is
He's bad.
He is so stiff, and he's like if DK wasn't good. That's what Quentin Johnson is.
I didn't realize I didn't realize how much cap space the Chargers have, guys.
They just cleared 25 million too, so they're like 80, 90 million.
Are they really?
They're at 91 million.
What?
Yeah. Well, they have no. Well, now because Khalil Mack's a free agent, he comes off, so they have no Bosa, no Mack. Other than Herbert, I don't think anyone else is paid on their team.
Derwin James.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you can have a lot of cap room if you have no good players. Like that's what the Raiders have. Like
wait.
Have that.
So wait, could you get 22 from them?
That's the question.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Out of the question.
Like they don't have a lot of like huge organizational needs. Like receivers the big one. If you can get them in a bidding war, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
That is one team where I might more want this year's picks than next year's.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But look, I'm gonna say it again. I think Baltimore's an interesting option. I think the Chargers are an interesting option. Someone threw out the Colts. I can't imagine him being interested in going to the Colts, but
go play with Anthony Richardson. Yeah,
Denver's another one. I'm gonna bring it up, and they've done deals before, and they've got a young quarterback, and they need targets. I mean, Cortland Sutton's not enough, so I think there's just a ton of these teams. So with all that in mind, what did I miss? Anything else that we haven't talked about related to this?
Just so people are aware, like trading DK Metcalf yields about $11 million in cap space. So that's good.
Are they actually going to sign offensive linemen?
Yeah, this show is supposed to be a free agency primer.
Like, what are they going to do? Like, they created like essentially $40 million of cap room already. Like, are they actually going to do the same 1-year deal thing and get a bunch of fringe guys? Are they actually going to sign offensive linemen? Like, do you feel better about that?
Whenever Brady reports something, I think it's always worth paying a little bit more attention to. And when he said Will Fries, I had said Will Fries, not because I had any sources, but that was just me looking at the free agent class. Jeff, I think you've talked about him recently as well.
Mm-hmm.
He seems like a guy that'll be more in line with what they're willing to spend, and going up from like $1.5 million for Laken Tomlinson to $8 or $9 million for Will Fries is a step up. But if they want to get the fans, well, it probably won't get the fans excited. If they want to get the folks that tune into this show excited, they sign Drew Dahlman.
You know who's a free agent this year?
Tell us.
His last name rhymes with Feitler.
I know. You think Kevin Zeitler is the big answer?
He had PFF gave him his second best year.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, but I'm saying like,
but he's so old, dude.
No, he's not. He's like 35. I mean, yeah, that's old. But, I mean, for a 1-year rental, he was a stud last year.
How does it make you feel that you're now at the age where you'd be considered old in the NFL? You've reached that point. Everyone say happy birthday to Evan, by the way. It's been not today, but we're close to his birthday. So make sure you wish Evan a happy birthday.
Yeah, I'm in the 30s club. It's crazy. But guess what? The hairline is only getting stronger and mother.
What are you dunking on us for no reason, man?
You're dunking on me. I usually wear a hat, you know?
I got my hat on for a good reason, man.
I usually wear a hat. I got a haircut today.
Dude,
you know when they show you the back of the haircuts?
Oh no, that's not. I don't need that.
I tell them like they're not allowed to do that to me anymore. I went to a barbershop a couple years ago, like downtown Toronto, and it was like all these like Asian ladies, and like so when my hair started to loose, and they started laughing when they saw my hair. So that's not a good sign.
It's rough.
Because I'm
I
not a
can't wait.
Mariners fan.
You have excellent hair.
Thanks.
I
bud.
can't wait till next year where you guys are both at the combine with me. That is going to be.
Ooh.
Oh
gonna
my
be
gosh.
hilarious.
I've already secured it. I'm booked. I'm locked in.
gonna
My
be
wife is
hilarious.
never gonna have to hear me talk about the combine again.
See,
So
Jeff, like you're gonna actually blend in. Evan, I feel like we got to convince Grant Cohen to come back, even though he didn't have anything to do. Like the two of them will just walk around causing mass chaos.
I want to talk to Dave Pearson.
I think-
I want to have an interaction. I want to start a dialogue.
I think I want to see that too.
Tell Dave Pearson I'm going to ask you to ask Mike McDonald to rank all the Seahawks players by sex appeal in their next press conference.
I think you live rent free in a lot of people's heads, Evan. I think you
I
do.
don't know why. I don't know why.
you don't?
I do.
I'm just a dumbass with a mic. Who cares what I think?
All right, we're gonna wrap it there. That's Evan Hill at Evan Hill HB, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons. I'll be back with you guys tomorrow, 1:30 with Robert Mays of The Athletic. I'll get to talk to him about his Bears taking all the good offensive linemen and about this DK move. And then, guys, I'm very excited about this. Friday morning, Willie Lampkin, prospect, the 270-pound center who could also maybe be a fullback, will be on the show Friday morning. So looking forward to connecting with him. If anyone missed the show this morning, Dane Brugler and Jonas Avenaya were awesome this morning. So make sure you check that out. And then Jeff and I hopefully will be doing our Seahawks Saturday. And I think, Jeff, we're going to have to do our free agent thing then because all that's going to start really getting close by Saturday. All right, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate it. If you haven't given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. I do see that there are some super chats. Let me take a look at these real quick. Evan, if you need to bolt, feel free. Otherwise, let me just look at these real quick. JJ Barenio, member for 10 months. One of my favorite lineups. Glad Evan made the show. That's why I wanted to make sure you saw that one. Whitney Shank. Hey, Whitney. Says, how do you replace DK and Tyler's production when Clint Kubiak mentioned DK specifically? I want to be real careful with the KK initialing that we're doing. That can go the wrong way.
One
really
letter
quickly.
away from real trouble.
The amount of people I heard nationally that pronounced his name that slipped and said decaf made me happy. Since we all went through that phase. I don't know, guys. Do you feel like we haven't really directly addressed this, but I don't think Jake Bobo is going to directly replace DK stuff. I think it's tight end, and you get another receiver in the draft, and you run. I think running back, you get more yardage on the ground.
The truth is, they're not going to.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
Yeah, run the ball. Use your tight ends.
Fumbles,
Let me ask you this: do you think that there is what are the odds that they trade DK Metcalf and that they average more points next year than they did last year?
Oh, it's like very possible.
If they sign offensive linemen, they will.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they can be a better offense even without DK Metcalf. I think they'd be a better offense with DK Metcalf. I'm not saying that, but I think they can be a better offense than last year even without him. Dogzilla Monster says, why don't we pay DK whatever the market says? I think we've kind of covered this a little bit, but does anyone have anything additionally to add to this?
Because it's a terrible idea.
I can't beat that.
What do you want me to say?
Well, he requested a trade.
I will say this, Dogzilla. I don't think that that's off the table. There is still some outside chance that the Seahawks find out what the market's offering and they're willing to match it. I don't think it's likely, but I think the Seahawks are looking at their roster and they're saying, we don't value that position, what the market's valuing it. And I think that's probably the right move. Jonathan King says, Egbuka, should he come here? And this is Emeka Egbuka, the receiver for Ohio State. I don't know. Should come home. I don't know that is he from here? I don't know that. He becomes more interesting of an option. I feel like he's just a duplicate of JSN, and JSN's very good. I'm looking for a dynamic speed receiver or contested catcher, someone who can like be different and more than different than JSN. I think you need some complementary players. Seahawks really are lacking. If without DK Metcalf, there is nobody that can run past anybody on this roster at a receiver position. So that's a big concern. And Igbuka is not that guy. Sheed says, I was called a Geno hater today because I said a 2026 first-round pick for DK would be great for Seattle's future. I don't know what to think anymore. You're not a Geno hater, man. That's just being a Seahawks lover. And look, I think you guys all feel this way, right? You get attached to certain players. You like certain players more than others. Jason Myers is an example. But at the end of the day, we're Seahawks fans. Like, if the Seahawks make a move to win and be better, then you gotta let go of some of the other guys. So I don't think there's any problem with saying, hey, Geno Smith, I'm a huge Geno Smith fan. You need to get someone new eventually. Gerald Sherrill has become a member. Welcome to the club, Gerald. So thank you for joining. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all of you. Appreciate Evan Hill. Appreciate Jeff Simmons. That will do it for us on Real Hawk Talk. I'm Brian M. Hauser. See you tomorrow for Robert May.